Phyrexia All Will Be One is coming out just around the corner, and it has a lot of mechanics both new and old, so I'm going to be doing a deep dive into each of them and talk about how they work. First, let's talk about the one that seems the most infectious, and that is the Toxic mechanic. This mechanic is an ability on creatures that is similar to something like Menace or Trample, where it's going to impact combat. And how it works is that if a creature with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets a number of poison counters equal to the Toxic level. So if a 3/3 with Toxic 1 dealt combat damage to a player, that player would take 3 damage and be given 1 poison counter. A player with 10 poison counters on them loses the game, so it's essentially an alternate way to win the game without having to take your opponent's life total to 0. This mechanic is very similar to Infect, a past mechanic that made creatures deal damage in the form of poison counters. However, this has some key differences to be aware of if you're used to the Infect mechanic. First, if the creature deals combat damage to a creature, nothing special happens, unlike Infect's -1/-1 counters. Second, it doesn't matter how much combat damage is dealt, it will always give a number of poison counters equal to its Toxic level. So boosting a Toxic creature's power does not increase the number of poison counters it gives, but doing something like Double Strike would. Third, it will deal both normal damage and give the poison counters, whereas Infect replaces the normal damage with the poison counters. This means you will deal the 3 damage and they will get the counter, they will not just get the counter. Finally, Toxic only works on combat damage, not any type of damage like with Infect. This mechanic serves to be a powered down version of the hyper powerful mechanic Infect and looks like a really awesome way to win the game. Some cards that use the mechanic have already been revealed or leaked, like Karamonix and Skrelev, who both have Toxic 1, so there'll be cards that have it, cards that give it, cards that care about it. However, Toxic is not the only mechanic to care about poison counters. Corrupted is an ability word that works very similar to Metalcraft, which enabled abilities of specific permanents if you controlled 3 or more artifacts. Corrupted works similarly, except the abilities are enabled if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters on them. This turns Toxic and poison counters overall into more of a resource and less of just a win or loss condition. It means 3 counters is better than 0, whereas in the past, 1 poison counter had the same impact on the game as having 9. In the past, only the 10th poison counter really mattered. Now, the 3rd has a major impact on cards like Shrelv's Hive and the Seed Core. Next, we have a returning mechanic that interacts with poison counters, that being Proliferate. This mechanic allows you to take any number of permanents and or players and give them another counter of each type that's already there. So if you had 3 creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, you would put an additional +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. If your opponents have 2 creatures with -1/-1 counters on them, you can add an additional -1/-1 counter with Proliferate as well, allowing you to interact with the entire board, not just your stuff. This applies to all types of counters, including Loyalty, +1/+1, Charge, and more. Specifically for this set, it also allows you to increase the number of poison counters on your opponents, allowing you to increase the number of counters over time instead of just having to use the Toxic mechanic. This is seen on many cards like Vraska, Betrayal Sting, and Bloated Contaminator. Another returning mechanic is Compleated, showing up on the Completed Planeswalkers. It allows you to pay 2 life rather than 1 of the mana cost to cast the spell using a Phyrexian mana pip, and if you do that, the Planeswalker enters with 2 less loyalty counters on it for each 2 life paid. We've already seen this in Kamigawa and Dominaria United, and now on 5 Planeswalkers in All Will Be One, including Luca and Nahiri. It's a powerful option, allowing you to basically cheat the mana cost in exchange for starting off with less loyalty counters. In addition, we have the return of the Battlecry mechanic, which is a quite simple mechanic. Basically, whenever a creature with Battlecry attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This can be quite potent, but is overall a really simple strategy that tends to lean towards go wide, and it's so far been only revealed on 1 card, that being Rhea Ivor. But it's sure to appear on more, as the Phyrexian's theme seems to be go wide, and Battlecry works really well for that. Next, we have for Miradin, which is a new mechanic for All Will Be One that is found on equipment in the set. It makes any equipment with the ability enter the battlefield with a 2/2 Rebel Creature token and have it automatically attached. It's pretty simple and is an upgraded version of the Living Weapon mechanic from the original Phyrexia, as you can unequip the equipment from the creature and still have it survive, so it's a better version of that. So you always get the 2/2, you can move the equipment to something else, and it's just kind of a nice little bonus. It kind of fixes the issue that equipment decks have, that sometimes you have all the creatures and none of the equipment, and sometimes you have all the equipment and none of the creatures. This is an equipment that comes with a creature, but you don't really have to use it, although you do always get it. It's appeared on a couple cards such as Blade of Shared Souls and Dragon Wing Glider. Very, very cool cards. Alrighty, that is it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe. And if you have any questions about any of the mechanics, leave them in the comments down below and I'll do my best to respond. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.